The first time Elvis Presley laid eyes on Priscilla Presley, she was just a kid 14 years old, wearing a sailor suit that made her look even younger. It was 1959, and Elvis was already a star, the king of rock and roll. Priscilla, on the other hand, was just a military brat living in Germany. But something about her caught Elvis's eye, and he couldn't get her out of his head. She was everything Elvis's fans imagined he would want in a girl: sweet, pretty, and adoring. But what they didn't know was that Elvis wasn't just interested in Priscilla's looks. He was drawn to her because she was so young, so malleable, and so willing to be his. For 6 months, Elvis and Priscilla spent long evenings in his bedroom at the U.S. Army base in Germany. They talked, they kissed, and Elvis made her feel special. He told her she was different from the other girls, that she was the one he wanted to be with. Priscilla was flattered, and she believed him. She thought she was the only one, but Elvis had a secret. He wasn't just dating Priscilla. He had other girlfriends, two or three at a time. Sometimes even one back home in the U.S. Priscilla didn't know this, and Elvis made sure to keep it that way. He was careful, always telling Priscilla that she was the only one who mattered to him. When Elvis's time in the Army was over, he had to return to the U.S. He didn't want to leave Priscilla, but he knew it wasn't the right time to bring her with him. So he gave her his combat jacket and told her to write to him on pink stationery. He promised he would take care of her, but as soon as he was gone, he disappeared, just like that. Priscilla was heartbroken. She waited for his letters, but they never came. She felt betrayed, but she still held on to the hope that Elvis would come back for her. She didn't know that Elvis was already moving on, back to his life of fame, fortune, and endless adoration. Back in the U.S., Elvis was more popular than ever. He was performing on TV shows, making movies, and surrounded by fans who would do anything for him. But he couldn't stop thinking about Priscilla. She was still on his mind, and he decided to get her back. When Elvis returned to Germany, he was determined to win Priscilla over again. He was older now, 24, and he knew what he wanted. He asked Priscilla's stepfather, a military man, if she could move in with him. The stepfather said no, but Elvis was persistent. He told Priscilla that he would take care of her, that she belonged to him. And when Priscilla turned 17, she moved into Graceland, Elvis's mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. At Graceland, Priscilla became more than just a girlfriend. She was a doll, a trophy, and a symbol of Elvis's success. He told her what to wear, what to say, and how to act. He wanted her to be the perfect wife, the perfect image of the good girl he claimed to love. But behind closed doors, Elvis was a different person. He was a womanizer, a drug user, and a man who lived a life of excess. Priscilla tried to be the wife Elvis wanted, but it was hard. She felt like she was living in a fairy tale, but it was a fairy tale that wasn't real. She was expected to be a servant, a sex kitten, and a naive schoolgirl, all at the same time. She saw Elvis with other women and she felt betrayed, but she didn't know how to leave. She was in love with him, and she thought she could change him. But as the years went by, Priscilla realized that she couldn't change Elvis. He was the king, and he would always do what he wanted. She started to see the dark side of his fame, the drugs, the infidelity, and the lies. She knew that their marriage wasn't what it seemed, and she began to question everything. One night, after a long day of filming, Elvis came home and found Priscilla fast asleep on the couch, waiting for him. He took her aside and put a bunch of white pills in her hand. "I want you to take these," he said. "They'll help you stay awake, but don't tell anyone." Priscilla was shocked. She didn't know what to do. She was scared, but she also didn't want to disappoint Elvis. She took the pills, and that night she stayed awake, watching Elvis perform, feeling the world spin around her. She knew she was in over her head, but she didn't know how to get out. The day Elvis Presley got married to Priscilla Presley was a whirlwind, orchestrated by the ever-controlling Colonel Tom Parker. The wedding took place at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, and the atmosphere was more like a business event than a romantic celebration. Priscilla, heavily made up, held her hand in a way that showed off her new ring, while Elvis, always the performer, dominated the conversation, holding her hand between his own. The newlyweds were quickly rushed to a press conference, where Elvis, coached by Parker, answered questions about his personal life. The reception that followed was filled with Parker's friends and business contacts, leaving Priscilla feeling like the wedding was more about Colonel Parker's interests than their own. Priscilla later wrote in her autobiography that she wished they could have had more control over their special day. She wanted to invite their own friends and have the wedding in a place that mattered to them. But the wedding was over almost as soon as it began, and the couple was swept into the next phase of their lives under the Colonel's watchful eye. Elvis's life after marriage was a mix of public appearances and private struggles. Despite his fame, he often felt trapped, unable to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Muhammad Ali, a fan, felt sorry for Elvis because he stayed indoors so much, and Red West, a member of Elvis's entourage, described him as a prisoner, constantly surrounded by people wherever he went. The pressure of fame was intense, and Elvis's behavior sometimes reflected this. Months after the wedding, a car was set on fire on the grounds of Graceland, and Elvis himself was involved in a physical altercation with a yardman. These incidents showed that even marriage couldn't tame the wild side of Elvis Presley. Elvis's relationships with women were often the subject of gossip and speculation. Columnist Dorothy Manners noted that it was probably for the best that Elvis didn't socialize in public, given the attention he attracted from women of all ages. Dr. Betty Berzon suggested that Elvis's preference for younger girls might have stemmed from a need for maternal comfort, while psychologist and writer Emily Sisley wondered if Colonel Parker was blackmailing Elvis over his relationships with underage girls. The Colonel's tight control over Elvis's life and image meant that many things were kept secret, and Parker maintained a stranglehold on Elvis throughout his career. Priscilla, for her part, seemed to accept Elvis's behavior, at least to an extent. Carrie Fisher, a friend of Priscilla's, believed that the thrill of being with the most famous bachelor in the world was worth the occasional quickie affairs. Priscilla was more concerned about Elvis's relationship with actress Anne Margaret, but even that didn't seem to be a major issue. She knew that Elvis wouldn't marry an actress, and Anne Margaret had her own career to focus on. Elvis's film career in the 1960s was a series of mostly forgettable movies. His performance in Harum Scarum, 1965, was particularly criticized, with film writer Paul Rosenfield describing it as a ridiculous and poorly executed attempt to mimic Rudolph Valentino. The New York Times was equally harsh about Frankie and Johnny, 1966, calling it a turkey. Even a more serious role in Charo, 1969, couldn't save Elvis from the declining quality of his films. By the end of the decade, Elvis's movies were mostly catering to an older, nostalgic audience, and younger viewers saw him as a relic of the past. Elvis's personal life was also in flux. On his 30th birthday in 1965, the Beatles were at the height of their popularity, and their success must have been a stark reminder of how the music industry had moved on without him. The Beatles visited Elvis at his home in Bel Air that year, and the impromptu jam session was a highlight, but it also highlighted the contrast between Elvis's fading relevance and the Beatles' continued dominance. By the time Elvis turned 40, his career and personal life were in a state of decline. He even had a facelift, though the results were subtle. Elvis's relationship with drugs became increasingly problematic. His friend and hairdresser, Larry Geller, noted that Elvis sometimes seemed more lucid on drugs than off them, and he was clearly struggling with addiction. The trust issues that had always been a part of Elvis's relationships became more pronounced, and he began to feel a growing sense of paranoia. He was wary of new people and preferred to rely on his trusted inner circle, the so-called Memphis Mafia. Despite these challenges, Elvis made a comeback in the 1970s, returning to the stage with a series of successful concerts. His career trajectory up in the 1950s, down in the 1960s, and up again in the 1970s was a classic example of resilience in the entertainment industry. Writer and director Nora Ephron observed that this ebb and flow was part of what made Elvis's success so enduring. Elvis's legacy is complex, a mix of talent, charisma, and the darker aspects of fame and addiction. His impact on music and popular culture is undeniable, and his story continues to fascinate and inspire. Leonard Bernstein, the famous composer and conductor, once shared his thoughts on Elvis Presley. Bernstein had to be careful about what he said, because he didn't want to seem like he was criticizing Elvis. He thought Elvis wasn't very independent or socially aware, but he admired Elvis's impact on music and his ability to bring sex and energy to his performances. Bernstein believed Elvis was a fantastic entertainer, even if he didn't fully respect him as a person. Ricardo Montalban, a well-known Mexican actor, had a different perspective on Elvis. In 1959, Elvis made a comment that many found offensive, saying he would never kiss a Mexican woman. Montalban understood that Elvis was uneducated about people from different backgrounds, and that there was still a lot of prejudice in the South. He pointed out that Mexico had abolished slavery long before the United States, showing that Elvis's comment was rooted in ignorance rather than malice. After making that comment, Elvis was cast in a movie called Flaming Star, with the Mexican star Dolores Del Rio. The film historian Carlos Clarens believed this was a way for Elvis to show that he was sorry for what he had said. In the movie, Elvis played a character who was half Caucasian and half Kiowa Indian, which was a significant step for him. Katie Jurado, a Mexican actress who worked with Elvis in the movie Stay Away Joe, said that by the time they made the film, Elvis had become more polite and possibly more aware of different cultures. She noticed that Elvis had some Native American ancestry, and that he was trying to learn more about other people. Don Siegel, who directed the film Flaming Star, had mixed feelings about Elvis. He thought the movie was one of the few good ones Elvis made, but he was surprised when Elvis turned away from making better films after that. Siegel couldn't understand why Elvis would choose to do movies that weren't as good. Elvis's stepbrother, Rick Stanley, explained that Elvis was always learning as he went along. He preferred to figure things out on his own, rather than through formal education. Elvis would often spend time alone, thinking about things and then asking questions to people he respected. Elvis's friend and spiritual advisor, Larry Geller, mentioned that Elvis created a meditation garden at his home, Graceland, where he could go to be alone and think. Some people were surprised to learn that Elvis was into meditation, but Geller also shared a funny story about how Elvis once asked if meditation was the same as medication. Elvis's name, which means the force of God in Hebrew, and his middle name, Aaron, had significant religious meanings. Elvis was interested in different religions, and he thought that the Tao, an ancient Chinese philosophy, was another way of talking about God. However, not everyone was impressed by Elvis's understanding of different cultures. James Shichta, a Japanese-American actor, heard a rumor that Elvis thought a Caucasian was a gay Chinese person. Another actor, Guy Lee, who played a character named Ping Pong in Blue Hawaii, said that Elvis didn't understand that people of Asian descent who were born in America were just as American as anyone else. Elvis faced rumors of making racist remarks about black people, but some believed these were just rumors used to discredit him. Josephine Premis, a singer and actress whose parents were from Haiti, thought that if the rumors were true, they were part of an early attempt to damage Elvis's reputation. Truman Capote, a famous writer, noted that using racial slurs was common in the South, including in Elvis's family. As a public figure, Elvis had to be careful about what he said. Capote believed that as Elvis met more people from different backgrounds, he became less bigoted, though he remained politically conservative. Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, was a complex figure. He was surprised when Marilyn Monroe converted to Judaism, showing that he didn't fully understand different cultures. Parker was also known for his frugality and for keeping Elvis's charity work to a minimum, believing that it would make Elvis more valuable as a performer. Elvis admired Tom Jones, a British singer, because he saw similarities between them. They both had a strong stage presence and came from poor backgrounds. However, Elvis was also competitive with Tom Jones, especially when it came to their voices. Elvis didn't like hearing about other singers setting records, and he was particularly upset when Tom Jones mentioned how Frank Sinatra had acknowledged him during a concert. Elvis's entourage members, like Marty Lacker, noted that Elvis had a mix of insecurity and confidence, and he could be both selfish and generous. There were times when Elvis's behavior was troubling, such as when he hit a longtime employee during an argument. Elvis was shocked by his own actions, but couldn't bring himself to apologize. In the 1970s, Elvis's behavior became more erratic. He was known for shooting at TV sets and windows when he was angry, and he often lashed out at people around him. Phil Donahue, a talk show host, pointed out that Elvis had become more right-wing and critical of the hippie movement and anti-war activists. Elvis's views were influenced by his admiration for J. Edgar Hoover and President Nixon, even though he had once been accused of poisoning young people's minds with his music. Joan Rivers, a comedian, observed that Elvis became more intolerant and self-righteous as he got older. He isolated himself in Memphis, away from the diversity of New York and Los Angeles. Charles Bronson, an actor, believed that Elvis would have been disappointed by his daughter Lisa Marie's marriages, especially her union with Michael Jackson, whom Elvis saw as using her for his own ends. Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, was known for his tight control over Elvis's career and his personal life. He was particularly upset when Elvis agreed to do charity concerts for free, and when Lisa Marie married Michael Jackson. Parker's private life was a mystery, and there were rumors about his past and his sexuality. Some believed he was gay, but kept it hidden to avoid scandal. Johnny Ray, a singer, compared his own experiences with greedy managers to Elvis's relationship with Parker. He said that it was common for performers to be unaware of what their managers were doing behind the scenes. Ray believed that sticking with a known leech was better than dealing with an unknown one. Tom Parker's success in merchandising Elvis's name and image was partly inspired by Johnny Ray Enterprises, which had created products like the Cry Kerchief, a hanky with Johnny's face on it. Parker's methods were crude, but they were effective. By 1956, sales of Elvis-related items had reached $22 million. Norman Taurog, who directed some of Elvis's movies, described Parker as a carnival barker who could sell anything. Taurog believed that Parker's talent for persuasion was what made him so successful, and he wondered if Parker might have achieved similar success with another singer if he hadn't found Elvis. Jerry Perenchio, a well-known dealmaker in showbiz, once said that Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's manager, had a knack for pushing Elvis buttons. According to Perenchio, Parker knew all about Elvis' fears and insecurities, especially when the Beatles and other young artists started gaining popularity. Parker used these doubts to get even more out of Elvis, even when Elvis wasn't sure if he had anything new to offer. Walter Matthau, who starred with Elvis in King Creole, believed that Elvis stuck with Colonel Parker for too long. Matthau thought Elvis put up with Parker's bad taste in fashion and other things, but was Elvis' own taste any better? Matthau noted that Elvis, once so handsome, stopped caring about his appearance and became overweight, which was a sad transformation. David Mancuso, a DJ, observed that Elvis was afraid of performing live after a long break. His biggest fear was that the audience wouldn't like him anymore, or worse, that they would laugh at him. To Elvis, being ridiculed would be unbearable. Gary Crosby, who co-starred with Elvis in Girl Happy, said that Elvis was eager to return to live performances but overdid it. By the early to mid-1970s, Elvis was getting tired of the constant touring and performing. It felt like he was doing it just for the money, which he didn't really need. Crosby thought Elvis kept performing out of fear that he would lose his audience if he took a break. Helen Reddy, a singer, saw Elvis' late career performances as a mix of success and sadness. Success was getting what you wanted, but happiness was wanting what you already had. Elvis had achieved so much, but it didn't bring him the contentment he sought. George Michael, another singer, echoed this sentiment. He believed that Elvis' later career was a good example of how success can sometimes lead to unhappiness. Despite having everything, Elvis was never fully satisfied. Mr. Blackwell, a fashion designer, recalled that Elvis had a long memory for slights. He never forgot when Frank Sinatra criticized him, even though Elvis appeared in Sinatra's TV special for the exposure. The hurt from Sinatra's words stayed with Elvis, and playing Sinatra's music was forbidden. Miguel Ferrer, the son of singer Rosemary Clooney, said that Elvis had a mansion in Bel Air, but didn't use it to socialize with Hollywood's elite. Elvis preferred more casual company and was hesitant to attend high-profile parties. Ferrer's mother thought Elvis didn't feel good enough for those circles. Slim Whitman, a country singer, remembered that Elvis bought a ranch in Mississippi where he could pretend to be a cowboy. However, Elvis got tired of it quickly and might have sold it. Hope Lange, who co-starred with Elvis, thought that despite his impact on the world, Elvis' personal life was quite small. He didn't engage much with things outside his immediate surroundings. Deborah Paget, Elvis' first leading lady, believed that Elvis never fully matured. His lifestyle reflected a lack of growth, even though he was a major star. Charles Brown, a blues singer, noted that when Elvis and a girlfriend had a fight, he would often take a vacation with someone else to teach the girlfriend a lesson. His mother, however, was the only constant in his life. Judy Carne, an actress and Burt Reynolds' first wife, said that Burt tried to model himself after Elvis. Burt wanted to be a non-musical, sexy version of Elvis to succeed in movies. However, Burt had a violent temper, and Carne wondered if Elvis was similar. Marilyn Petrone, a music executive, shared a story about Elvis' impatience. One time, when his uncles weren't at the gates of Graceland, Elvis ordered his limo to be driven through the gates. He was used to getting his way immediately. David Cassidy, a singer, said that the story about Elvis driving through the gates might be true, but if it happened, it was likely done by a paid employee while Elvis waited safely outside. Rod McEwen, a poet and songwriter, was shocked when he learned about Elvis' less-than-perfect behavior. Despite having everything, Elvis sometimes acted immaturely. McEwen saw this as a lesson about the emptiness of material success. Johnny Mandel, a songwriter, believed that Elvis eventually realized how drugs and weight gain were affecting his performances. He might have lost some of his passion, but he didn't want to disappoint his audience. Nina Falk, an actress and acting coach, mentioned that Elvis was admitted to the hospital in April 1977 with multiple health issues. It's possible he knew his time was running out. Priscilla Presley, Elvis' ex-wife, was shocked when Elvis publicly threatened people who said he was strung out on drugs. This was unusual because Elvis usually kept his emotions private. Andy Velas, an Elvis fan, was disappointed by a 1975 concert in Florida. Elvis talked more than he sang, which was a letdown for Velas. Velas felt that Elvis was phoning it in. Bonnie Tigel, a producer, said that many aspects of Elvis' life remain a mystery. We can guess, but most of the questions will never be fully answered. Tom Jones, a singer, told a strange story about running into Elvis in a hotel shower after a performance. Elvis opened the shower door and started singing, which was both surprising and surreal. Lamar Fike, a member of Elvis' entourage, said that Elvis was curious about music and other singers, but not about history or art. His interests were focused on his craft. Cousin Billy Smith recalled that Elvis would sometimes jump around on his bed, especially when he was upset or sharing gossip. He loved having an audience, even in private moments. Ann Dollard, a talent agent, mentioned that Colonel Parker was trying to sell Elvis' contract in May 1977 to pay off gambling debts. Despite Elvis' declining health, Parker was still making deals and trying to keep Elvis in the spotlight. John Crampner, in his book about peanut butter, described a 1976 trip Elvis took to Denver to eat fool's gold loaves, sandwiches filled with peanut butter, jelly, and bacon. The trip cost $16,000, and Elvis and his friends didn't even get off the plane to exercise. Boyd McDonald, a columnist, noted that psychics predicted Elvis' death in the summer of 1977. Whether they were truly psychic, or just saw the signs of Elvis' self-destruction, is debatable. Alan Carr, a manager, said that Elton John attended an Elvis concert and thought Elvis looked like a corpse. The orchestra leader also commented that Elvis was essentially living out his final days. Sammy Kahn, a songwriter, observed that Elvis' voice declined from 1969 to 1973 or 1974. His vocal quality changed, and he struggled with some notes he used to hit easily. Linda Wohl, a legal executive, believed that Elvis made a huge mistake by firing 3 close friends in a cowardly way. This decision led to a book that exposed the truth about Elvis' life, which hurt him deeply. Jerry Herman, a Broadway composer, said that Colonel Parker and Vernon Presley, Elvis' father, were both out for themselves. Elvis relied too much on these father figures, even though they didn't serve him well in the long run. Cliff Harrington, a journalist, noted that Elvis' father canceled pre-paid tickets for Sonny West's family, which led to a major falling out. Elvis was furious but didn't want to be the bad guy, so he had his father handle the firing. Linda Thompson, Elvis' girlfriend from 1972 to 1976, said that Elvis never wanted to be the one to deliver bad news. He preferred to avoid confrontation, which led to awkward situations. Marty Lacker, a member of Elvis' entourage, said that Red West tried to help Elvis with his drug problem, but Elvis resisted and resented it. Elvis was in denial about his addiction. Red West himself said that he and the others felt something for Elvis, despite the difficult times. He wished Elvis would get well, and saw the firing as a personal betrayal. Conway Twitty, a singer, said that Elvis was devastated when the Wests published a tell-all book. The public exposure of his personal life deeply affected him, and he canceled a recording session as a result. Christopher Pennock, an actor, wondered if Elvis' death the day after the book's release was a coincidence. The timing was certainly suspicious. Richard Gully, a columnist, noted that the West's book sold 3 million copies, but they avoided the media for 2 decades after its release. They felt they had told their story, and didn't want to keep reliving it. Irish McCalla, a friend from Elvis' early days, said that the day before Elvis died, he had to go to the dentist for 2 cavities. The combination of the book's release and the dental visit must have been overwhelming for him. Elvis' potential role in A Star is Born with Barbra Streisand and could have changed his life. The film might have resurrected his acting career and possibly earned him an Oscar nomination. However, it's unclear whether Elvis declined the offer or if Colonel Parker sabotaged the deal with excessive demands. Elvis' drug use and binge eating fueled his grueling tour schedule. Even before his death, there were many Elvis impersonators. After his passing, these performers became known as tribute artists, and there are thousands of them worldwide. Elvis' father and Colonel Parker continued to manage his legacy, with Parker earning a massive fortune but leaving a small estate. Elvis had 4 grandchildren he never met. His only grandson died by suicide in 2020, ending the Presley name. But as an entertainer, Elvis lives on. His estate earns more posthumously than he did in life, and Graceland remains a major tourist attraction. His premature death contributed to his ongoing adulation and the rise of new fans. 11 days after Elvis' burial, there was an attempt to steal his body, similar to what happened to Charlie Chaplin in Switzerland. The attempt was clumsy and failed. Later, Elvis and his mother were reburied in the meditation garden at Graceland, where they remain to this day. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was more than just a musician. His life and legacy touched many hearts, but it also sparked a lot of debate. People had different views on his life, his music, and his untimely death. Some loved him, some criticized him, and others were just plain confused by the whole Elvis Lives phenomenon. Beatrice Arthur, a famous actress, once shared a story about how the court dropped charges against 3 men who tried to steal Elvis' body. The court thought they were just trying to prove that Elvis was still alive. This shows how deeply the idea that Elvis Lives had taken root in people's minds. Agent Frank Rio, a friend of Elvis, was fed up with the Elvis Lives nonsense. He believed Elvis was dead and should be remembered for what he did, not for some wild conspiracy theory. He wanted people to focus on the good things Elvis achieved, rather than pretending he was still out there somewhere. David Letterman, a well-known talk show host, saw Elvis as more than just a musician. He believed Elvis created a whole lifestyle, something that went beyond just the music. This lifestyle included the way people dressed, the way they talked, and even the way they thought. Leonard Bernstein, a famous composer, agreed. He believed Elvis changed everything: music, language, clothes, and even started a social revolution. Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was a cultural icon. Kathy Griffin, a comedian, saw Elvis as a symbol of youth, sex, and rebellion. He wasn't just a performer, he was a symbol of a whole generation's desire to break free from the old norms. But not everyone saw Elvis in such a positive light. Dick Gautier, who played Conrad Birdie in the play Bye Bye Birdie, thought Elvis died at just the right time. He believed that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have continued to decline both physically and artistically. This view suggests that sometimes it's better to be remembered in your prime rather than seen in decline. President Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, felt deeply about Elvis' death. He believed that Elvis was unique and irreplaceable, and that his death was a loss to the country. This shows how Elvis' impact went beyond just entertainment. He was a part of the national identity. Billy Smith, Elvis' closest cousin, had a different perspective. He believed Elvis dug his own grave, suggesting that Elvis' choices and actions contributed to his downfall. This view is harsh, but highlights the internal struggles Elvis faced. Irish singer Bono saw Elvis as a mirror to America. He believed Elvis started out loving, but later turned on himself, much like the country he came from. This metaphorical view suggests that Elvis' life was a reflection of broader societal issues. James Bacon, a columnist, believed that Elvis committed egocide, meaning he destroyed his own image. He pointed out that Elvis rarely showed up to accept awards, which suggests a lack of self-care and recognition of his own importance. Cousin Harold Lloyd thought that dying young had its benefits. He believed that people forgave Elvis' excesses, and remembered him for his early success rather than his later struggles. This view suggests that a tragic end can sometimes preserve a positive legacy. Drew Barrymore, an actress, agreed. She believed that dying young helped Elvis' image, especially physically. This view is common in the entertainment industry, where youth and beauty are often valued highly. Natalie Wood, an actress who knew Elvis, had a personal impression of him. She saw him more as a boy than a middle-aged man, even after he gained weight. This shows how deeply the image of the young Elvis was ingrained in people's minds. Gianni Bozzacchi, Elizabeth Taylor's personal photographer, had a unique perspective. He believed that Elvis oozed sensuality and had a feminine beauty, but he was hidden behind his elaborate costumes. Bozzacchi thought that if Elvis had stripped away the sequins, he could have rediscovered his early charm and recovered his lost image. Liberace, a famous pianist, had a friendly relationship with Elvis. He believed that Elvis was fun to be with, and even influenced Liberace's own style. Liberace felt a sense of loss after Elvis' death, and believed that no one could replace him. Elizabeth Scott, who co-starred with Elvis in Loving You, saw him in a rut. She believed he was getting older and heavier, taking fewer risks and living off his past glory. This view suggests that Elvis struggled to evolve and stay relevant. Peter Guralnick, a biographer, quoted a review of one of Elvis' final concerts. The review described Elvis as a series of postures, someone who was too tired or bored to care. This suggests that Elvis' performances in his later years lacked the energy and passion of his earlier work. Elton John, a renowned musician, attended one of Elvis' concerts in 1976. He described Elvis as looking like a corpse, surrounded by people who were supposed to be taking care of him. This vivid description paints a bleak picture of Elvis' final days. Paul Michel, a clinical psychologist, believed that Elvis had several health issues, including hypertension and an impacted colon. He suggested that these conditions made it harder for Elvis to take care of himself, which likely contributed to his decline. Linda Thompson, Elvis' girlfriend around the time of his 40th birthday, believed that Elvis was suffering from severe depression. She saw him as a willing partner in his self-destruction, which is a tragic view of his final years. Edwin Schneidman, a suicidologist, believed that Elvis' fear of losing his sight due to glaucoma was a major cause of his depression. This suggests that health issues had a significant impact on his mental state. Kang Rhee, Elvis' karate instructor, believed that Elvis was in perfect shape for 5 years until 1975. After that, Elvis started gaining weight and became ashamed of his appearance. This shows how quickly things can change and how a person's self-image can affect their behavior. Scott Timberg, a music journalist, believed that Elvis' multiple hospital stays were not widely publicized. He suggested that each hospitalization was a step closer to his death, which highlights the severity of his health issues. Lee Graham, a columnist, believed that the media was loyal to Elvis and didn't report on his lifestyle issues. He proposed realistic stories but was rejected by editors, which suggests a level of censorship or bias in how Elvis was portrayed. Leslie Cheung, a Hong Kong singer, believed that Elvis' motto, taking care of business, didn't apply to himself. This suggests a disconnect between Elvis' public persona and his personal life. Marty Lacker, a member of Elvis' entourage, described how Elvis went to great lengths to get drugs. He even dug a hole in his foot to get more pills, which shows the depth of his addiction. Lamar Fike, another member of Elvis' entourage, believed that Elvis was a tormented person who didn't know how to stop taking drugs. This view suggests that Elvis was trapped in a cycle of addiction and self-destruction. Robin Williams, an actor, saw two sides of Elvis: the young, chart-busting, sexy Elvis and the older Elvis in spangled jumpsuits. This duality is a common theme in discussions about Elvis' legacy. Gene Siskel, a film critic, believed that Elvis left behind an amazing musical legacy, but also several of the worst films ever made. This suggests that Elvis' film career was a mixed bag. Gary Merrill, an actor who starred with Elvis in Clambake, felt that the film was a step down from his earlier work. This shows how Elvis' film choices were often criticized by his co-stars. Betty White, a TV star, believed that Elvis quit movies at the right time but continued with live appearances for too long. She suggested that this led to the rise of Elvis impersonators, which turned into a whole industry. Jeffrey Boehm, a screenwriter, found it difficult to come up with a compelling story about an Elvis impersonator. This suggests that the impersonator phenomenon, while popular, lacks depth. Lynn Redgrave, an actress, found the Elvis impersonators who performed marriages in Las Vegas to be tacky. This shows how some people found the impersonator culture to be an exploitation of Elvis' image. Michael Hutchence, the Inks singer, believed that the rise of Elvis impersonators was mortifying for Elvis. This suggests that Elvis was aware of the impersonators and didn't like the idea of being copied. Don Ho, a Hawaiian singer, believed that few people knew the extent of Elvis' addictions and unhealthy behavior. This suggests that Elvis' struggles were hidden from the public eye. Vernon Presley, Elvis' father, was upset when Caroline Kennedy wrote an article about her visit to Graceland. He believed she insulted the memory of Elvis and the Presley family. This shows how the family tried to protect Elvis' image even after his death. Bonnie Tygell, a senior producer for Entertainment Tonight, described a reporter from the National Enquirer who disguised himself as a priest to get an interview at Elvis' funeral. This shows how the media's intrusion into the Presley family's grief was a significant issue. Cher, a famous singer, was asked about her relationship with Elvis due to tabloid stories. She denied ever meeting Elvis, which shows how the media often fabricated stories to create drama. Al Hirt, a trumpeter, described the Elvis Lives phenomenon as an urban legend. He believed that some people didn't want to accept Elvis' death, which led to the rise of sightings and conspiracy theories. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis' manager, claimed that Elvis was still alive and communicating with him. This shows how the Colonel continued to capitalize on Elvis' image even after his death. Sharon Sheely, a songwriter, found it hard to believe that Elvis could have faked his own death. She believed that he would have remained in the public eye if he had retired. This suggests that Elvis' death was real, not a hoax. J. Russell King, a New York Times deputy editor, described the battle between the Colonel and the Presleys over Elvis' estate. He believed that the Colonel's misdeeds were eventually revealed, which tarnished his image. Leslie Gore, a singer, believed that the Colonel held Elvis back as an artist, especially in the film industry. She suggested that the Colonel used Elvis to make money, which led to his decline. William F. Dufty, an author, believed that Elvis found in the Colonel a father figure who he never had in his own life. This suggests that the Colonel had a significant influence on Elvis' career and personal life. Malcolm Forbes, a journalist, reported that the Colonel earned an estimated $100 million as Elvis' manager, but left only $1 million in his estate. This shows the extent of the Colonel's financial gain from Elvis' success. Bert Loving, a croupier, described the Colonel as a gambling addict. This suggests that the Colonel had his own vices that may have influenced his decisions. Lance Loud, a journalist, described the Colonel as one of the biggest users of Elvis. He also mentioned Michael Jackson's marriage to Elvis' daughter as a way to capitalize on Elvis' image. This shows how Elvis' legacy continued to be exploited even after his death. Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis' daughter, confirmed that Michael Jackson had used her. This shows how the Presley family continued to be involved in controversial situations. Jennifer Lawrence, an actress, believed that comparing oneself to Elvis often backfired in the entertainment industry. This suggests that the pressure to live up to Elvis' legacy was too high. Robert Van Winkle, better known as Vanilla Ice, believed that it was his turn to be in the spotlight. This shows how younger artists often try to claim their own place in the industry. Billy Ray Cyrus, a country crooner, felt disrespected and compared himself to Elvis. This suggests that he saw himself as a successor to Elvis' legacy. Tina Vespucci, a radio critic, criticized John Schneider's performance of It's Now or Never. She suggested that Schneider should stick to acting rather than trying to become a singing star. This shows how difficult it was for other artists to fill Elvis' shoes. Lillian Smith, a teen magazine editor, described David Cassidy as the new Elvis. She believed that Cassidy had the same on-stage moves that made Elvis famous. This shows how the entertainment industry often looked for the next big thing. Barbara Walters, a journalist, believed that becoming famous took time and a unique persona. She suggested that being called the new Elvis was not a guarantee of success. This shows how the entertainment industry often looks for new talent, but doesn't always find it. K.D. Lang, a singer, found it foolish to be called the female Elvis. This shows how the comparison to Elvis was often seen as a burden rather than a compliment. Mario Lanza, an operatic singer, believed that Elvis didn't deserve so much attention. He suggested that his own voice was more special, and that he didn't struggle to get people to listen to him. This shows how some artists felt that they were more talented than Elvis. Johnny Ray, a singer, believed that Elvis was a first-rate interpreter of other people's music, but didn't have the discipline to write his own songs. This shows how Elvis' talent was in performance rather than composition. Sammy Cahn, a lyricist, believed that Elvis took unnecessary liberties with song lyrics. He considered this unprofessional and disrespectful to the songwriters. This shows how some in the music industry felt that Elvis didn't always respect the art of songwriting. George Harrison, a Beatle, believed that Elvis was a lost soul who never found himself. This suggests that Elvis' fame and success didn't bring him inner peace. John Lennon, another Beatle, believed that Elvis never found himself outside of music. This shows how the Beatles saw Elvis as a talented musician, but a person who struggled with his identity. George Michael, a singer, believed that Elvis hated the Beatles. He suggested that this was evident in Elvis' green eyes. This shows how the rivalry between artists can create tension and dislike. Marilyn Petrone, an executive, believed that Elvis earned more in death than most performers earn alive. She suggested that the profits came from Graceland and memorabilia rather than music. This shows how Elvis' image continued to generate income, even after his death. Warren Casey, a co-creator of the musical Grease, described the opening of Graceland to the public. He believed that this was a turning point for the Presley estate. This shows how the family turned a personal tragedy into a business opportunity. Herb Keane, a columnist, described the Presley estate as a big and intimidating business that tried to control Elvis' image. He suggested that the estate sued anyone who tried to use Elvis' image, except for authors. This shows how the family tried to protect their financial interests. Ricky Kaufman, a business advisor, described how the greed of Elvis heirs expanded as the posthumous profits grew. He believed that the estate even put a stop to popular velvet paintings of Elvis. This shows how the control over Elvis' image was a significant issue for the family. Elvis Presley's life and legacy continue to be a source of debate and discussion. Whether you see him as a cultural icon, a tragic figure, or a complex person, there's no denying that his impact on the world of music and entertainment is undeniable. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, is an icon that has been both celebrated and scrutinized. His life, from the early days of fame to his untimely death, is a complex story that has been both romanticized and criticized. People often see what they want to see, and this is especially true when it comes to Elvis. At Graceland, Elvis's former home, the image of the king is carefully curated. Publicist Andrea Jaff noticed that the Elvis presented there is a sanitized version, free from the flaws that made him human. They've whitewashed him to the degree that it's not really Elvis, she said. This idealized version of Elvis is meant to appeal to tourists, but it strips away the complexity of his life. Actor Christopher Pennock echoed this sentiment, saying that some employees at Graceland prefer to call this process rehabilitation rather than whitewashing. But the real Elvis, with all his flaws and complexities, was more interesting. David Cassidy, a teen idol in the 1970s, was often compared to Elvis. Danny Bonajuice, who co-starred with Cassidy in The Partridge Family, remembered Cassidy as a god to him. But Cassidy's attempt to become another Elvis didn't work out. By the 1970s, Elvis himself was a different person, and Cassidy's efforts to emulate him were in vain. Elvis's stage outfits were a reflection of the peacock revolution of the 1970s, according to costume designer Ray Aghian. Jumpsuits, embroidery, capes, and jeweled accessories were all the rage. However, these outfits have become a source of ridicule, and only Elvis imitators can pull them off today. When the government asked people to vote on which Elvis should be on a postage stamp, the choice was between the white jumpsuited Vegas singer and the original 1950s Elvis. Unsurprisingly, the 1950s Elvis won. This vote reflected a preference for the younger, more dynamic Elvis. Elvis's life in the 1970s was marked by excess, as Leonard Bernstein observed. Drugs played a significant role in his decline, and by the 1970s, almost everything about him spelled excess. His refusal to go back to his earlier self contributed to his downfall. Country songwriter Harlan Howard noted that many stars don't wear well over time. Fans often prefer to remember them in their prime. For Elvis, the 1950s were his golden years, and the 1970s, while seeing a comeback, also saw the build up to his fatal decline. Singer Doreen Waddell recalled that people went to see Elvis live for different reasons. Some remembered him as the king of rock and roll, while others were amused by his flamboyant outfits and on-stage antics. As time went on, more people went to see him to confirm that he had indeed changed, becoming heavier and more eccentric. Andy Warhol, the famous artist, had a unique perspective on Elvis. He believed that Elvis was better as a graphic image, a photo or a poster than as a singer. What truly resonated with his fans was how he looked and moved, not necessarily his music. Charles Guggenheim, an Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker, pointed out that Elvis's face was his fortune. If he had been plain but had the same voice, he would be just another singer on a list of former biggies. His striking looks were what set him apart. Elvis's hair, which eventually turned white, was a point of interest. His hairdresser, Larry Geller, suggested that he let his hair grow and revert to its natural white color. Elvis was hesitant, but he never had the chance to consider it further. He died at the age of 42. In the 1950s, Elvis had a boyish charm that made him attractive. As he aged, his appearance changed, and his style evolved. Designer Mr. Blackwell noted that Elvis's black leather outfit during his TV comeback revitalized his career. It was a bold move that worked. Elvis had his share of personal struggles, including sexual hang-ups and a mother fixation. Hal Cantor, who directed the film Loving You, mentioned Elvis's phobia toward women who had given birth and his kink for girls in white panties. These issues hint at deeper psychological problems. Gore Vidal, the famous writer, discussed Elvis's desire for a big family and his aversion to sex with mothers. If Elvis had married Ginger Alden, they might have had a child. However, his aversion to sex with women who had children complicated this scenario. Psychologist Dr. Joyce Brothers suggested that if Elvis's twin brother had been born, his mother, Gladys, might have been less clingy. This could have led to fewer psychological problems for Elvis. However, it's up to a secure, healthy adult to prevent an attitude from developing into a phobia. James L. Dickerson, who wrote a book about Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, described Elvis as backward for his age. He related better to kids and young girls than to adults, and had a complex relationship with women. John Mallow, a costume designer, noted that these aspects of Elvis's personality were often overlooked when he performed. When Elvis and Priscilla Presley's divorce was announced, many people were surprised. Carolyn Jones, who co-starred with Elvis in King Creole, revealed that Priscilla had found a man who was interested in her as a woman. This was the real reason for the divorce. Elvis's jealousy and self-destructive behavior were evident when his girlfriend, Linda Thompson, left him. He tried to plan the murder of her new lover, but was thankfully ignored. Herb Ritz, a photographer, noted that Elvis's actions often put him in dangerous situations. Elvis's business decisions were often poor. He invested in a chain of racquetball courts, which failed, leading to a lawsuit against him. Despite this, He retained the people who advised him on the investment until his death. Morgan Mary, a business manager, found this behavior puzzling. Elvis's fascination with guns was driven by a mix of paranoia and a desire for power. George Weinberg, a psychotherapist, suggested that this fixation was related to his need to dye his hair black and his denial of his own drug habit. These aspects of Elvis's personality were subconscious, hidden even from himself. Nancy, a Graceland maid, described Elvis's excessive spending on guns and ammunition. He would buy expensive items and then spend lavishly on himself and his entourage, often causing financial strain. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, would express concern, but Elvis would continue his spending habits. Elvis's visit to the Nixon White House was driven by his desire for a narc's badge. He wrote a rambling letter to Nixon, discussing his views on communist brainwashing techniques. The Elvis and Nixon movie portrayed him as sober, but this contradicts the accounts of his associates. Elvis also declined Nixon's request to perform at the White House. Priscilla Presley's relationship with Elvis was strained by his extramarital affairs and drug use. In 1971, she decided to give their marriage another chance, but it didn't last. Richard Gully, a columnist, noted that Elvis was growing out of control while Priscilla was growing up. Elvis's relationship with his daughter, Lisa Marie, was also complex. He often substituted expensive gifts for time with her. Otis Blackwell, a songwriter, observed that Elvis was more focused on his career and less on his family. Elvis's lifestyle in the 1970s was marked by extreme weight fluctuations and drug use. He would binge on food and then starve himself, and he would take inhuman doses of uppers and downers to prepare for performances. This behavior took a toll on his health. In Pontiac, Michigan, Elvis's weight gain was evident to the 60,000 fans who saw him perform. Brad Gray, a talent manager, noted that Elvis no longer cared about his appearance or his health by the final years of his life. Elvis's entourage was loyal to him, but their dismissal led to the book Elvis, What Happened. Joe Esposito, a road manager, believed that Elvis shouldn't have fired them. Elvis's mother, Gladys, died at 46, a fate that Elvis often cursed. He would live only 4 years longer than she did, dying at the age of 42. Elvis's health issues were numerous, including glaucoma, hypertension, an enlarged heart, and other conditions. He was taking a variety of drugs, which likely contributed to his decline. Look magazine detailed the extent of his drug use. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley both died young, but their public images were very different. Teresa Brewer, a singer, noted that Marilyn never got fat, and there are no ugly photos of her. Elvis, however, did, and these photos are often suppressed by the Elvis estate. Actors who have portrayed Elvis have faced the challenge of capturing his essence. Kurt Russell, David Keith, Val Kilmer, and others have taken on the role, each bringing their own interpretation. The pressure to look like Elvis is intense, but the performance is what truly matters. Michael Shannon, in the film Elvis and Nixon, worked to portray Elvis's inner turmoil, including his insecurity, jealousy, and rage. Kevin Spacey, who played Nixon, praised Shannon's performance. Even lesser-known actors like Frank Stallone have played Elvis, contributing to the numerous portrayals of the king. Tony Corkle, a UK critic, noted that the appearance of an actor is less important than their ability to capture the essence of the character. Marlon Brando, who played a Presley-esque character in The Fugitive Kind, observed that biographical films often omit the true essence of their subjects. Despite this, filmgoers often leave with the impression that they understand the person. Elvis Presley's life was a roller coaster of fame, excess, and tragedy. His legacy is a mix of the idealized image and the complex reality. The king of rock and roll continues to captivate and fascinate people, but his story is far from simple. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was more than just a singer. His life was a mix of music, movies, and a whole lot of style. But as much as people loved him, not everyone saw him the same way. Some thought he was a legend, while others saw him as a bit of a joke, especially in his later years. See David Heyman, a biographer, felt that Elvis's real story was much more interesting than any sanitized movie could show. He thought that fans who wanted to worship Elvis wouldn't want to learn the real, more complex story. They'd rather read a book for that. Las Vegas magician Doug Henning had a different view. He remembered Elvis's transformation during his Vegas shows. Before Vegas, Elvis was seen as a bit serious. But once he hit the Vegas stage, he became a lot more fun. He wore capes and sparkly costumes, and it made him seem more down-to-earth and playful. Catherine Murray, who co-hosted a TV dance show with Arthur Murray, remembered Elvis's love for his costumes. He was always trying something new, and those white costumes with rhinestones and capes became his signature look. It was his way of keeping things fresh and exciting. Martha Heyer, the widow of a famous producer, said that Elvis felt a bit awkward at first with his new look. But with the help of other performers like Liberace and Elton John, who were already known for their bold styles, Elvis adapted. He became a showman, and his costumes made him stand out even more. Helen Forrest, a singer, recalled the time Elvis wore a gold lame suit designed by Nudie of Hollywood. It was so flashy that it even made Liberace look tame. The suit became famous and was featured on the cover of one of Elvis's albums. It was a bold move that both amazed and shocked people. James Gregory, who acted with Elvis in the movie Clambake, said that Elvis wasn't very comfortable in the gold lame suit. It was more of a statement than something he enjoyed wearing. He only wore it a couple of times, and then just used the jacket with regular pants. Barbara Stanwyck, who starred with Elvis in Roustabout, thought the gold suit was probably an idea from Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker. It was the kind of over-the-top look that the Colonel liked. Scott Larson, a collector of Elvis memorabilia, shared some lesser-known facts about Elvis. He didn't wear underwear, he shaved his armpits, and he would tear up fan letters into tiny pieces. These little details showed a more personal side of the king. Joni Hannigan, a former fan club member, was disappointed when she saw Elvis in Las Vegas. He had gained weight, and his stage outfits couldn't hide it. It was a big letdown for her, as she had grown up idolizing him. Photographer Helmut Newton witnessed Elvis's decline. During one of his later concerts, Elvis was clearly on drugs. He was giggling and forgetting his lines, and it was obvious that things were not going well for him. Eileen Carnahan, an Irish tourist, felt that Elvis should have stayed home if he wasn't in shape. She believed it wasn't fair to the audience to see him looking bloated and unhealthy. She wanted to remember him as the dreamboat she had seen on TV. Tom Dowd, a Grammy-winning producer, said that despite his early image as a rebel, Elvis was actually more of a square. His fame came from his ability to express his sexuality and passion through his music and performances. That famous shaking knee was a symbol of his sexual tension. Leroy Green, a classmate of Elvis, remembered how Elvis's style was influenced by the Pentecostal churches he attended. The emotional expressions and the sense of being possessed by the Spirit were part of Elvis's performances. When he sang, he was completely in the moment. Don Ho, a Hawaiian singer, noted that before Elvis, singers were expected to stand still on stage. Elvis followed in the footsteps of Johnny Ray, who was known for his emotional performances. This made Elvis stand out and become a sensation. A.C. Lyles, a Paramount executive, pointed out that if Elvis had stayed just a singer, he would have been forgotten by newer styles and artists. His movies, even though they weren't always great, kept him in the public eye. Cher, the famous singer, said that Elvis's face was iconic. It represented a time when music was fresh and exciting. While he might not have been the best singer, he was definitely the most exciting. Adam West, who played Batman, thought that the Elvis craze was driven by nostalgia. People remembered him as a symbol of a simpler time, not necessarily a better one, but a time that felt more appealing. Don Steele, a Hollywood studio chief, believed that dying young elevated Elvis and Marilyn Monroe to a higher level of fame. Their early deaths made them seem almost mythical. Troy Donahue, an actor, shared that his original name was Merle Johnson, and he had to change it to Troy Donahue. He thought Elvis was lucky to have been born with his name. Anthony Perkins, a closeted actor, admitted that he liked Elvis a lot but didn't name his son after him, despite what some people might think. Elvis Costello, the singer, explained that his name is pronounced differently from Abbott and Costello. He is Irish, not Italian, and his first name, Elvis, is now international. Juan Garcia Esquivel, a Mexican composer, said that dyeing his hair black made Elvis look more Latin, which helped him become popular in Latin America and Japan. People could relate to him more. Richard Gully, a columnist and assistant to Jack Warner, mentioned that Elvis resisted suggestions to grow a mustache. At the time, mustaches were seen as foreign-looking. Carol Lindley, an actress, recalled that Elvis's hairdresser once talked about perming his hair, but the Colonel didn't want to change anything that was working, so the idea was dropped. Del Shannon, a singer, heard a rumor that Elvis had a test to make sure any hairdresser who worked on his hair was straight. Shannon thought it was because Elvis was uncomfortable with other guys finding him attractive. Kate Millett, an author and activist, noted that in the early days, everything was controlled by men. While women loved Elvis, some men were made uncomfortable by him. She suggested that some men might have been afraid of being attracted to him. James Scheijta, an actor who worked with Elvis, said that Elvis was very professional on set. He would do his job and then retreat to his dressing room. Scheijta wished he had gotten to know Elvis better, as he found him very compelling. Edith Head, a costume designer, hardly ever talked about her work with Elvis. The movies he starred in were moneymakers, but they were often forgotten or ignored. Guy Lee, an actor, said that he was often asked about Elvis, but he didn't know him well enough to say much. He worked with him briefly, and didn't have much insight into who Elvis really was. Tennessee Williams, the playwright, based a character in his play The Fugitive Kind on Elvis. The character was a sexy minstrel who women found irresistible, but who was more attached to his guitar than to any woman. Toady Fields, a comedian, mentioned a scene in The Fugitive Kind that strongly implied oral sex. She wondered how Elvis felt about it, and speculated that he might have been okay with the subject being discussed. Jeffrey Boehm, a screenwriter, was working on a screenplay about a singing sensation who became a movie star, but then walked away from Hollywood. He put the project aside when Elvis died, as it was too similar to Elvis's story. Ray Caniff, a band leader, said that Elvis wasn't a great guitar player, but played the piano better. Robin Williams, the actor, said that Elvis's death gave a boost to his record sales. It allowed people to focus on his music, rather than his appearance. Williams joked that dying was a brilliant career move for Elvis. Howard Delaney, a writer, visited Graceland on the 10th anniversary of Elvis's death. He was disappointed by the commercialism, and the fact that the neighborhood surrounding Graceland hadn't benefited from its success. Jessica Charles, a travel writer, noted that unofficial gift shops sold Elvis merchandise for less than the official Graceland gift shops. Graceland was unhappy about the competition. Jay Livingston, a songwriter, said that Elvis had a gaudy taste in decorating. After Elvis's death, his ex-wife Priscilla redecorated Graceland to make it more reflective of her style. Barbara McNair, a singer, pointed out that the Elvis estate often ignored the black influence on Elvis's music and performance style. He covered songs by black artists, but his versions became more popular. Skippy Lowe, a talk show host, mentioned that Elvis Presley's Memphis, a restaurant and nightclub, was a huge success. People could eat Elvis's favorite foods, listen to his music, and buy souvenirs. Priscilla Presley said that Elvis Presley's Memphis was meant to be a place where Elvis would have enjoyed entertaining his friends. She wanted guests to experience Elvis's hospitality. Eddie Munoz, an actor, tried Elvis's favorite sand, which fried peanut butter and banana and found it delicious. Erica Doss, a cultural studies professor, criticized Elvis Inc. for its focus on making money rather than improving Elvis's image. The company licensed products like Elvis socks and bowling shirts, which he found tacky. Lisa Etterberry, a travel writer, mentioned that the Richard Nixon Presidential Library was selling wristwatches featuring a picture of Nixon and Elvis shaking hands. She thought it was a bit much. Life magazine reported that in 1995, 2 groups of skydiving impersonators were suing each other, showing how much Elvis was missed. Elvis, a gay Mexican-American performer, called himself an Elvis interpreter. He mixed Elvis's music with salsa and created his own versions of classic songs. James Warren, an Elvis tribute artist, said that he wasn't an impersonator, but an artist who paid tribute to Elvis. He found it rewarding and a good way to make a living. Ted Harrison, a writer, noted that the number of Elvis tribute artists grew from 170 at the time of Elvis's death to 85,000 by the year 2000. There was even a popular Chinese Elvis performing in London. Paula Dell, a stuntwoman, said that the tribute artists had to wear the Vegas-style costumes to create the illusion of being Elvis. The 1970s look was more recognizable, and if they tried to imitate his 1950s style, it wouldn't work as well. Leslie H. Martinson, a film and TV director, said that the tribute artists' costumes might look ridiculous now, but they were less so when Elvis wore them in the 1970s. If Elvis had lived longer, he might have changed his style. But because he died in the 1970s, that's the look that everyone remembers. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, left behind a legacy that continues to captivate new generations. His life was a roller coaster of fame, love, and struggles, and his story is far from over. Even decades after he left us, people still talk about him, dress like him, and sing his songs. Elvis's style on stage became more extravagant as time went on. Some say this was because he was inspired by Liberace, a flamboyant pianist who knew how to put on a show. Others believe it was because his voice wasn't as strong as it used to be, and he needed something to keep the audience's attention. Either way, his sparkly jumpsuits and dramatic moves became iconic. Elvis's family has had a tough time following in his footsteps. His daughter, Lisa Marie, tried to make a name for herself in music, but it didn't quite work out. His grandson, Benjamin Keough, faced similar challenges and struggles with depression. Sadly, Benjamin passed away in 2020, and his death was a reminder of the pressure that can come with such a famous name. Despite the ups and downs, Elvis's memory lives on through his music and the love of his fans. In Las Vegas, you can even get married by an Elvis impersonator, which shows just how much he means to people. But it's not just about the show. Elvis's impact goes deeper than that. Elvis himself was a complex person. He was nervous on stage, despite his confident appearance, and he often felt lonely even when surrounded by fans. He loved his fans, but also felt misunderstood. He found peace in meditation and in a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which he carried with him wherever he went. Elvis cared deeply about his family, especially his mother, who he said was always there for him. He was protective of his loved ones and wanted to provide them with the best life possible. When his mother passed away, it was a devastating blow, and he often spoke about how much he missed her. In his later years, Elvis struggled with the weight of his fame and the expectations it brought. He wanted to be a successful actor, but felt that Holly would never truly understood him. He missed the thrill of performing live and connecting with his audience. Elvis's life was a mix of highs and lows, but through it all, he remained a beloved figure. He once said, "Someone to love, something to look forward to, and something to do were the keys to a happy life." His legacy continues to inspire and remind us of the power of music and the importance of staying true to oneself.